Hello and welcome to Grognard Solo Gaming. I am the Grognard and today we're looking at Explorers of the Untamed Wilds by Carsten over at the Solo Spelunking channel. So, what is Explorers of the Untamed Wilds? It's two things really. First of all, it's an adventure for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but it's also a tool to make D&D 5e easier to play solo or cooperatively without a dungeon master, and this is done by offering the players preset defined moves that they can make. Basically, you get 4 moves every day, and depending on what environment you're in, you get different ones to choose from, and there are 3 environments. You can be in a town, in the wilderness, or in a dungeon. I'm not going to go into more detail right now, except to say that the goal of the adventure itself is to defeat the evil mage Al-Arash. So, to get started, I got some books, I got some dice, I got some pencils, paper, counters, and tokens, I got some cards, then I got some maps, some hero minis, some villain minis, and in case anyone is wondering, these minis are for the board game Arena the Contest. And finally, I generated a random hex map according to the instructions in the module, and you generate 8 different patches of terrain. You have 3 towns, 3 dungeons, and finally the tower of the evil mage Al-Arash. I created a party of 4 full characters because I've played and DM'd 5e quite a lot and I enjoy making characters, but if you don't want to do that, there are rules for sidekicks that are quicker and easier to manage. I used the standard point buy system for the attributes, but I did multi-class creatively to make some strong combos. I had a paladin hexblade warlock, a twilight cleric, a fighter wizard, and an assassin rogue. So now I'll give an overview of what my experience was like playing Explorers of the Untamed Wilds, and as I do that I'll mention some of the game mechanics, and then at the end I'll give a review of what I thought. So if you just want to hear the review, feel free to skip ahead using the timestamps, because there will be some spoilers, especially if you want to go into the adventure not knowing anything ahead of time. So I started in the town in hex F4, and one of the actions you can take in town is to go to the notice board to pick up quests. So on day 1 I picked up 3 quests from the notice board, and those quests were to make a delivery to another town, to kill 6 goblins, and to harvest 3 spider silk from giant spiders. Whenever you get a quest to kill something, you roll up a random hex, and in that hex are the right type and number of enemies you need to finish the quest. That way you can either go to that hex and kill them all, if you're able, or you can kill them over time as you stumble upon them randomly. I decided the delivery was too dangerous for my level 1 characters, and the goblins were located in the level 6 mountains, so that left me with the giant spiders in hex D7. So I decided to simply end my day, which you do by sleeping at the inn, and if you use the common hall, it's free, it doesn't cost any gold pieces, but then it doesn't give the benefit of a long rest, and that was fine as no one needed a long rest in the party. Day 2, I left town to look for the giant spiders, and technically they were giant wolf spiders. In the wilderness you have a movement of 4 every day, and base hexes of grasslands or plains cost 1 move to enter, hills, swamps and forests cost 2 moves to enter, and mountains cost 3 and also require some gear to enter. In a base hex, that is one without terrain, you have a 1 in 6 chance of an encounter, and in terrain hexes you have a 2 in 6 chance. And I say chance and not risk, as most of the time I found myself wanting to have encounters. So, stepping out of town, I ran into 4 hostile cultists. They turned out to be incredibly unlucky, however, getting terrible rolls and failing to even inflict a single point of damage before they died. Then I reached the hills without another encounter, and having used up 3 of 4 moves, I could not enter D7 but had to make camp. Making camp uses a survival role and a special type of varying difficulty that is recurring in Explorers of the Untamed Wilds. As you can see on the map, there are red circles with a number, and that is the level of that hex and all surrounding hexes. That level decides difficulties for skill rolls and also the challenge rating of enemies on the encounter table you roll on. For setting up camp, the difficulty is 11 plus X, where X is the level of the area, and as I was in level 1 hills, the DC was 12. And if you succeed, you can rest safely, getting a long rest and no encounter during the night. And you can also take one special camp action per character, such as to forage, craft something, or to lift morale with a performance, giving the party inspiration for the next day. Finally, you use rations while in the wilderness, and those use a usage die system between a D8 and a D4, and they decrease on a roll of 1 or 2. I will not be going into my camp actions, nor how the rations change their usage die, but I did set up a safe camp on day 2. Day 3, I moved into Hex D7, and I successfully defeated the 3 giant wolf spiders, but I only succeeded in harvesting 2 out of the 3 silk glands, and since I failed, I got to roll up a new random hex with wolf spiders. Unfortunately, it was located in the level 5 mountains, so I decided not to go there. Then I took a short rest and headed back towards town in Hex F4. I encountered a crumbling watchtower that I decided not to explore as my characters were still level 1, and despite their high AC and relatively high hit points with con bonuses all around, I still considered them squishy and I didn't know how hard the encounters would be. I failed to make a safe camp, but I still did not have an encounter during the night. Day 4, I had no encounter before reaching the town, and when I got there I took a free rest at the inn. Day 5, I picked up new quests. One was to kill a varied mix of 10 monsters. One was to collect the fangs of a direwolf, and the last one was a repeat of the delivery quest I decided not to do. So since you can have 3 active quests, I ditched the spider quest and picked up the 2 new ones while skipping the delivery again. This time I decided to wander the streets in town, which is one of the actions you can take in a town, but only if the whole party goes together. The first thing to happen was that I came across a thug roughing up a commoner, so I intervened by failing to intimidate him and instead murdering him where he stood. Still a successful encounter in my book. After that, I found a pop-up vendor with good prices, but I didn't have enough gold to buy anything, so I simply ended up moving on. And finally, I caught a pickpocket and turned him over to the authorities before taking a free rest at the inn. Day 6, I started a journey to find the direwolf in Hex A3, and I got all the way to B4 without a single encounter, and then, despite an unsafe camp, I had no encounter during the night either. Day 7, I moved into Hex A3 to fight the direwolf, and though I was successful, my paladin did get one-shotted down to 0 hit points, but he was saved by his friends after his second death save, so disaster was avoided, and I moved into the adjacent town in Hex A4 to give the paladin a long rest at the inn. Day 8, I decided to go back to town in Hex F4, and I fought off an illness, but it didn't really matter, as paladins can cure disease with lay on hands. Then I had no more encounters and finished the day with a safe camp. Day 9, I simply entered the town and took a free rest at the inn. Day 10, I turned in the direwolf quest and leveled up the whole party to level 2. Then I picked up new quests, one to kill 6 bandits in Hex D7, and one to kill an owlbear in Hex D8, and I skipped a quest to attempt to slay a young dragon for obvious reasons. Then I finished with a free rest at the inn. Day 11, I moved into the hills to the southwest and made a safe camp. Day 12, I moved into Hex D7 and killed 6 bandits. At this point, I had stopped using minis and maps in order to save time, because I wanted to get as far as possible while I had some free time. Then I took a short rest and moved on to Hex D8, where I fought the owlbear. Here I did make a few rolls to start the fight at a distance, but I felt it was fair as the wizard now had a bird familiar for scouting, and the party succeeded at both survival and perception rolls using the module's standard rules for DC. Then I ended the day with a safe camp and a long rest. Day 13, I headed back to town in Hex F4. I passed an ancient tomb, but I did not investigate it because I did not think it would progress my third quest at all. And from now on, I'll no longer report on the camps unless there was an encounter. Day 14, I avoided a hunter's trap that was a hole in the ground filled with wooden spikes at the bottom. Then I entered town and took a free rest. Day 15, I turned in the 2 quests and leveled up the whole party to level 3. Then I picked up 2 new quests, one of which was to find a relic in a dungeon, the other one was to kill goblins. Then I walked around town and I found a giant spider that I killed. Then I bought a longbow +1 for my rogue, who had proficiency due to being a wood elf. And finally I encountered another thug, and this time I decided to simply attack, and it was a short fight. Day 16, I decided I wanted to try the module's system for dungeons, so I headed to Hex E1 as that dungeon was level 3. I made it there without encounters and entered the dungeon on day 17. Here I have to say that the dungeons do have 20 different encounters, but I just kept rolling the same few things over and over again, so in my head I decided that the party had a terrible sense of direction and simply kept going in circles because that was much funnier to me. The first thing I found was an old alchemical laboratory where some party members were poisoned by the fumes. Then I found an old prison where the party was attacked by a wight. At this point, level 3 encounters were quite easy as I had a well-balanced party with high AC, 2 healers and lucky HP rolls. Finally, on day 17, I found some old barracks where the door could be locked for a safe long rest. Day 18, I wandered back to the prison and found some gold this time. After that, I found a shrine to a good deity where the characters got blessed with inspiration. Then I was back at the alchemical laboratory again, inhaling toxic fumes. Finally, I found a ritual chamber that held the relic I needed for the quest. Day 19, I wandered into a slimy cave where I defeated a gargoyle. Then it was time for the alchemical laboratory again, and I started to think that at least one party member had become addicted to the fumes and kept leading the others back to inhale some more of them. Probably high on the fumes, the party then stumbled their way back into the slimy cave, where they defeated a hellhound, or they hallucinated that they defeated a hellhound. Either way, they got the XP. Finally, it was time for the old alchemical laboratory and the fumes once again. Whoever the party addict was, at least he was happy. Day 20, the party wandered back into the slimy cave, but this time they found no encounter. After that, I found a fountain, but despite their state, the party knew better than to mess with it, as it could cause instant death. Then I found a treasure chamber guarded by a mummy. Unfortunately for the mummy, it was vulnerable to fire, and 2 party members had the firebolt cantrip, and that quickly ended the mummy's career as a treasure chamber guardian, and the paladin ended up with a longsword +1. Finally, the only way to celebrate gold and magical items is apparently to go and inhale toxic fumes at the old alchemical laboratory again, so the party did just that. Day 21, I went back to the slimy cave once again and defeated 6 zombies. then to the prison, then the barracks, and finally, yes, one last hit of the toxic fumes at the laboratory. And at this point, the party members who were not addicted decided it was time to leave before they started to have their intelligence score permanently lowered from brain damage. Day 22 I traveled, and day 23 I was back in town and I turned in 2 quests, and the whole party leveled up to level 4. And at that point, since I had already looked at Al-Arash's stats, I decided I was cool enough to defeat him, so I journeyed to his tower in hex F12 and attacked him. I am not going to spoil his stats, but I did defeat him in 2 rounds by ganging up on him, baiting out his reaction spell to prevent counterspell, casting silence, and then keeping him in the silence using the sentinel feat. And with that, the adventure was over after 27 days in the game. Unfortunately, I didn't keep track of how long I spent playing, but it was several hours. So, what do I think of Explorers of the Untamed Wilds? I think it's great. It does exactly what it sets out to do, which is to set up an adventure that can easily be played solo or without a dungeon master. It has enough variety for the amount of time you spend playing, and the special rules are easy to follow. Also, there are many little things that make playing the game more fun, like +1 items being for sale, so finding gold feels meaningful, and troublesome encounters that wouldn't normally give XP now give XP, which prevents them from becoming a nuisance. Also, if it seemed easy, the answer is yes, it was fairly easy, but keep in mind that Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is generally easy, and also I chose to make it easy by making strong characters, so I would not fault the module for that. And I think the module itself is well balanced, especially for beginners and less optimized parties with sidekick characters. I would definitely recommend Explorers of the Untamed Wilds to anyone who wants to play 5th edition solo or play it without a dungeon master. I think it is especially good for beginners in the solo RPG hobby, but it's also very easy for more experienced players to add to the game. Finally, I would like to thank Carsten for making this module and sharing it with the rest of us. If you're interested in Explorers of the Untamed Wilds, you can find it among his community posts, and I'm sure you can also contact him about it. And that concludes the video. Thanks for watching.